Okay, everyone, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have a great gentleman here on the podcast, and it's very hot where he is today. It's kind of cool up in Canada, so I'm feeling quite lucky to be where I am right now. But Jake is here on the podcast. He's got some great things going on in his community. He's using his content creation to help people, which I love. And if you want to know more, we'll have links to everything in the show notes as always. But I really want to introduce everyone as my guest co-host today. Jake is here on the podcast. Jake, welcome to the How to Podcast series. I'm so glad to have you here.
Yeah, David, I'm excited. And we last time we talked, like we said, we should have just recorded this.
I know, right?
Because we just had the conversation. We were just going down a road, and we were having just a great conversation. So I'm looking forward to attempting to recreate that a little bit, bring some new stuff to your listeners, and just do what we do, right? It's that come from contribution. It's that show up and just share the message that you've got, and everybody's got one. And we would love if anybody can take a nugget, one little nugget that gets you over the hump from, maybe I'll think about doing it, to, I could do it. That's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to help.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your podcast creations, your content creations, the things you've done previously, and give us an update on what's just happened last night. We'd like to bring people up to speed.
Yeah. So my first podcast that I did was called Embrace the Suck, is what it was called. That's the first one that I did. And that was, me as a talking head. And it's all about the conversations about doing the hard things that you're supposed to do, because all the great things live on the backside of the hard things, right? That's where the money lives. That's where the accolades live. That's where the victory lives. If you are running a marathon, this is the example I always give. If you're running a marathon, it's far, right? We know that it's far. That's how far a marathon is. Somewhere during that race, you're going to hit something called the wall. The wall sucks. It just does. Everything hurts. It feels like, even if you're running downhill, it feels like you're climbing stairs, and that's a moment you're like, man, I could give up and just walk away and say that I've gone far enough. And yet that's the moment, right? That's the spot to where that's the hard things. You got to embrace that suck in that moment, push through it, because what happens when you finish it? You proved to yourself you could. You did something amazing that not everybody does. You made a decision to do it. And how much better are you for it? Because we know that's where all the great stuff goes. So that's the concept of where Embrace the Suck was. And it was, I was using I'm a very metaphor-driven guy. That's one of the things I tend to play with. So like one of the episodes I remember, that's one of my favorites out of that one. I was out in the barn. And I was working on the tractor, and it was cold. It was middle of winter. I've got my beanie hat on, and I've got my coveralls, and the engine is completely ripped apart on the tractor. And we're just having I was just having a general conversation using the tractor as a metaphor of whether I needed to, should I fix something? Should I spend the time fixing it, or just throw it away and buy something new? So that was where that concept came from. And it was one of my favorite pieces that I grabbed. And that one got a ton of views, and it was cool. And mostly that podcast was all about me just getting my message out. It was less to do with the audience engagement. Like I was hoping, I'm like, okay, if I reach one person out of this, I'm cool with that. And that's where that one started. It was just like, I needed to practice getting my message out. Is where that was. And it's all lo-fi stuff, and that's okay. I mean, it was all phone filmed, and terrible audio and fuzzy video and poorly cut together, but I did it. And it's out there. It lives out there forever as a part of my story and part of my journey. And that's a huge piece. And I love that. And that's one of the things that you and I talked about, relative to that, is just making sure we can get the message out. Now, was it purposeful? No. It wasn't super purposeful. Didn't all go out at the same time, same day of the week, like we know business should run. This was when the muse struck. Like I'd grab my phone, I'd set it up I'd lean it against something. I didn't have a good tripod at the time. And I would record, something 5, 6, 10 minutes that was just on my mind that I thought hopefully somebody can get some value from. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback over the last couple of years for it. and the weird ones that people would grab that I thought, well, this was stupid. I should never post this. Right. And we've all had those, just that was like, why did I even record that? Why did I even put that out there? It was kind of dumb. But some of those I've had people reach back and they're like, man, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that on that day. Thank you for that piece. And then, so you never know who you're going to touch and when relative to the message that you have. So I put out, I think we've got 195 episodes of that one that I put out. And now it's all bonus content. We're starting to go a different direction. Much like you, and you've got a couple of podcasts that I think are just the coolest ones that are out there. I mean, you do your Christmas one, which is just amazing. I think it's so cool. And you've got several out there because you've got different audiences that need to hear a slightly different message in a slightly different way. So we've got another one that we're going to start running out here pretty soon. That's going to be much more real estate directed. So that's going to be through LGI, and that's a couple months down the road. But do we need another project? No, but is there a message there that somebody needs to hear? Yeah. And there's some other people that want to do this podcast and know that I can help them do it. So I'm going to help them do that one. And then the one we just launched, which I was wildly resistant to initially. I was wildly resistant to it. My own limiting beliefs, I was stuck in my own way with this. We launched a new TV show last night, which was, horrifying, exhilarating, a ton of fun. And it was really cool. I saw a couple Facebook comments that popped up during the live of, holy crap, you're on TV, which, yeah, I'm on TV. Go look at that. That's amazing. No, it's not ABC, CBS or anything, but we built a TV show. It looks just like a podcast. It smells like a podcast. It talks like a podcast. It's just launched on a different platform. When it comes right down to it, we get to call it a TV show. So that one's called Total Disruption. That one is with my co-host, Michael Liberci, and I are running that one out. And we're just talking about not anything you've never heard before. This is one of those, there's nothing we say on there that hasn't been said before. There's very little that's original. Sometimes we come up with a really cool line that's like, ooh, we got to trademark that. That sounded neat. But for the most part, it's just conversations relative to business about being disruptive in business and what it's an upspin of embracing the suck of that particular podcast. And it's just with my partner. So we have those interviews, and then we have other interviews of who we'd call disruptors in different industries, whether it's in podcasting, whether it's in general business and finance. We're going to have some interview conversations with them. And that's going to be super fun. And then we're going to do some additional bonus live Q&A. Those I'm looking forward to those. I love doing the lives because you have no clue what's going to happen during those. Those are fun. There's no way to prepare. Everything's going to break. It's going to be great. So, I mean, that's the stuff that we're playing with. And it's with one of the things that we decided to do, and you and I talked about this, and I know from a co-host perspective, I'm totally garnering all of the sound right now, but just going back to what we were talking about. One of the things we're doing with Total Disruption is I've always thought in my businesses, and we've always done it, and David does it too, and a lot of most people do it. We give on Sundays at church, and we go to an event and we donate money to a cause, or somebody calls us and says, hey, we've got this thing. Would you like to donate your time or your money? And we go do the thing, right? Awesome. We go do that. And I was at it's called Podcast Revolutions. It was in Los Angeles, and I don't know, a couple months ago that I was there. I don't even remember what month it was, but there was a wildly successful podcast that was on that made a statement relative to the importance of putting your cause on the front end of your podcast and just telling your audience purposefully, we are committed to sponsoring and supporting and doing what we can to promote this cause. And part of your subscription when you subscribe goes immediately to that. And the data that they showed was amazing of how much money they were able to create relative to that cause. So we started thinking about that. And then I heard another speaker not too long after that, his name's Will Black, that was talking about how easy it is to do it relative to merchant services. So if you have a, subscribe button on your podcast, then they can take the credit card fees and a percentage and automatically donate straight to that cause. You don't even have to do the billing on the backside, and it doesn't cost you anything additional. It's a delightful little tax write-off if you're looking, for that purpose. But the response that I've gotten, and you and I even talked about this, the response that I've gotten relative to that is people are circling the wagons around what we're doing because we're putting that first. It's okay to be humble. Like, it's all right. We're cool with that, I donated this much money and we did this thing and we all kind of stay in the background. But it's also okay to say, you know what, these guys need our help. And we have an audience that we can leverage and we can create more revenue for them. We can create more opportunities for them. So a couple of them that we're doing. So like we're doing Boys and Girls Clubs of America, because that's one that I'm passionate about. I really like that one. And we're also doing Wounded Warriors, which is another one that we're both very passionate about. So we're able to put that front foremost, like you click here, you donated money to the thing immediately by watching our stuff, which I have really, really, really enjoyed. So, I mean, that's been, and I know that you tell people that all the time is, talk about it, have the conversation. So, I mean, like, what's the feedback that you're getting relative to that when you tell people? Because you had a very interesting comment you told me earlier, when people ask you, when you tell them to donate.
Yeah. So the big thing that I've always been telling my audience is that you do not have the things you need in life because you haven't asked. Like, as a podcast listener, we are under the assumption that everything's covered, it's all taken care of, and that this is free content, and we don't really understand what's happening behind the scenes, right? So when people say, well, I haven't made any money with my show, for example, I'm like, well, have you ever thought to ask your audience to let them know that it takes resources to do this? And if they can't donate financially, maybe they can help you with something that you need help with, that you would normally have to pay for, your time or your money, right? So maybe there's someone who wants to step up and give you a hand and take care of something that you would have to do anyways. That might be a way they can be a part of it. I love encouraging people who are even like 10 episodes in to have some way of having a donation piece to what they do as a way for your audience to engage with you. For me, I use Buy Me a Coffee on all my stuff. I don't talk about it a lot, but in the last 6 to 8 months, about $5,000 have come in from my audience just by having it out there. And what I do with it, because I have a job, I really don't need the money to sustain the podcast, is I then reimburse that and redistribute it back to other podcasters, because I want them to see what it feels like to get that first email that says somebody's donated to your show. I want you to see what that feels like. That's an engagement piece. That goes beyond having an avatar, a pretend listener that you don't really know, to knowing that Jake is listening to my show. Jake just sent me $5. And to you, it might seem very small, but you take those and combine them together. And that's just a great reinforcement for you as a new podcaster that you're on the right track. So what I love about you, Jake, is as I research you and going back into your story a little bit, you're a very humble gentleman, but you have had success in your life. And what I notice sometimes with people who do have success, whether it's found or earned or whatever, is sometimes people build these big walls to protect their success and to keep them isolated and insulated from the outside world. You're the type of person who doesn't build big walls. You build a bigger table. You invite more people around the table. And that's what I get from you. And that's what I love of that you're using your content to help support other communities and services that we need. And you don't do it for the fanfare. You just do it because you can. And as a community member, when I find out that my favorite podcaster or content creator or television personality takes my humble little $5 donation, which is probably the best I can do this week, but takes that and adds it together in a bigger pot and then help somebody with it. I am now bought into what you do because I had a small piece in helping somebody else. So that's what I encourage everyone to do is, if you don't need the money, still have a way for your audience to say thank you. It could be as simple as a $5 donation. But that's the initial start where your audience starts to see the fact that they're part of something bigger than just content, bigger than just a podcast or a TV show. They're part of a community. And when they see that pooled resources helping somebody, it just starts to expand from there, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's just a beautiful thing. So I love what you're doing with your show.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's one of those things, like, of course, we love to hear that. Like, it does. It makes us feel good. And it's okay. Like, and there's a chemical, neurological thing about that. There's things that it does for us when we thank other people. Like, when we were able to do that, and when we receive it and truly take it, it does things for us chemically, and it boosts it adds to the happiness bucket, right? It just adds to that bucket. It's no different than, like, I coach on this all the time. And, like, one of my favorite things when I've got clients that are having a grumpy day is I will tell them to go to Starbucks, not to go buy a coffee, but I will tell them to go to Starbucks and stand there, open the door for the next 10 people that walk in, smile at them, and say good morning. Like, literally just make eye contact, smile, and say good morning, because it creates an endorphin rush for you. It builds you up. It starts to go that direction. And then you go in and you buy coffee for the next 5 people for no other reason than you just can. You just walk up to the counter, give them $50, and say, this is for the next 5 people. And you walk out. Like, no, you're not going to stand there and get the accolades of thanks for my cup of coffee. This is, and what tends to happen, and this is based on what you said, this is one of the things that historically happens, because I've watched it. I have gone and been a voyeur. Like, I've sat in the corner and I've watched this thing happen because I challenged a coaching client to do it. They didn't want to go by themselves, so I went with them, but I sat and I watched. So they did it. They opened the door. You watched them, like, stand up and get bigger and get happier. And it was like, it feels good while they're opening the door. They went out, they put their $50 down, said, nobody has to know who it is. And immediately what started happening is that person still paid for coffee, but they paid for the person behind them. So all of a sudden, like, there was this cool wave that built, and it went on for a long time. I quit watching about an hour. Nobody paid for their own cup of coffee for close to an hour. Everybody paid for the next person's. So that's exactly what you're talking about with what you do. And that's one of the reasons you and I connected so well. You're like, yeah, you guys are bringing me that $5 donation, and I'm just taking that and immediately passing it into that next bucket. And I'm growing that next person. And that's so critically important. And that's of all the things, like, if we look back in our, everybody in their childhood at some point in their younger life had wishes they had that moment to where somebody would just reach down and give them a hand and help them up the wall. Like, everybody has that moment. The more we do it, the more frequency it's going to happen across everything. And at some point, like, whether it was you that reached down and pulled somebody up, or 10 levels deep, somebody pulled somebody up because of that $5 donation that showed up and you passed it along. So it's exponential. There's a couple great books, and I was going to when you mentioned Ask, that is so integral in our universe that we just don't do. We just don't ask. And it's, whether it's a humility, a fear, a lot of people have a lot of different things, but there's nothing wrong with asking. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. The answer is always no if you don't ask. Mark Victor Hansen wrote a great book called Ask. That would be a great one for anybody listening to read. It's written different. I like that one. It's written in 2 parts. Well, the first part is a fable, and the second part is more a strategic analysis of what it is. So totally cool. And it's a great book. Really enjoyed Ask. The other one, based on what we were just talking about, I tell you, 7 Levels of Communication is a great book. I like it on Audible myself, because that one is written kind of like it's written like a novel. It's not a how-to. It's written more like a novel, so it's fun to listen to, but there's some perspectives in there. And as this is where it ties back into podcasting and what you and I are doing, they talk 7 levels of communication. So the easy, like we all remember the MLM days of what those things are. There's some that are still out there, but like one person knows 7 people. Now those 7 people each know 7 people. Those people each know 7 people. So in 7 levels, I can't remember exactly what the number was, but it's like 150,000 people just by simply engaging in that particular thing. So this is where we talk about that other people's audiences and being able to reach out there. So yes, your shows have X amount of people that are on them that are loyal to you and they watch you and they connect with you. And they all have audiences themselves. So what are you able to contribute to them that they then contribute to their audiences, that their audiences are then able to contribute to either their families, local organizations? The numbers get big really, really, really fast. And that's why I love the analogy of the $5, right? The $5, $5, it seems like a very small thing now, but it's compounding interest. $5 added to this big bucket added to that bigger bucket, that great big old bucket added to that truck. That's what compounds it and really starts to make an impact in our world. So, I mean, like where I go back and I said my original podcast was just really for me. It was like, that was the thought process. And it was, did it impact people? You bet it did. It impacted people. That impacted people. If I did the math, even if I just looked at my views, which I don't know, wasn't that many on each episode, wasn't that many. However, if I do that compounding interest piece, I likely touched a whole lot more people than I would have. So even in this conversation, like when we're talking to your audience today, all of them are podcasters and or going to be podcasters or know podcasters that they're trying to help that all have audiences. So if you and I reached 100 people today that all had 1,000 people in their audience total, which is a nominal, reasonable amount that most people can easily attain, we're going to touch a whole lot of people really, really, really fast with the same conversation. And I love that concept of the compounding piece. It's not the immediate, like Facebook, oh, I only got 10 likes on my thing. It's different. Your reach is much bigger than you think it is when you talk with other people, when you engage with the other people. And that's what I learned coming into podcasting. Is one of the reasons we grabbed the TV show. It's different audiences. Now we can broad scope that. And, I have a very selfish goal in the moment right now, and I'll totally own that I want to touch 1 million people this year in some way, shape, or form, one way or the other. And through the compounding interest, it's not that hard.
No, you're right.
It sounds like such a big number, but this is the way we do it. Yeah. Like just this conversation right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of the idea for my show is I wanted to have people on, not just to talk podcasting, because that's important. I want to encourage the next podcaster behind us that are contemplating starting a show, and they're here listening going, I think I can do this. Jake says I can do it. I can do it. So that's part of it. But the other part is I do want to build the community, and I want people to hear what other people are doing in the space, because it's not really a show about me, and I never wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a show about the community of podcasting so that we could all help each other grow. So again, as you're listening to this, you're like, I want to check out Jake's TV show. Then yeah, you need to, and you need to share it with your community and help Jake grow this. Because again, there's a direct connection to helping charities to do better for what they do. So like everyone wins in this situation. So that's kind of the reason why the show exists in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. It's about creating wins. I've got a friend of mine that talks about creating a win triangle. Like you can create a win-win and that's good. But he said there's nothing stronger in the world than a triangle. That's the single most strong shape on the planet. So he likes to create win-win-wins is one of the things. I love the concept. His name's Jason Miller. And it's just a great idea relative to that. And I mean, we use that triangle to describe so many things, but I love that fact that it's a win-win-win. So like for you and I, the example today is it's a win for me to have a conversation with you. because I get to have a conversation with your audience. It's a win for you because I bring my audience to your podcast. It's a win for all the other podcasters because somebody's going to take a nugget that they're like, now I believe I can. That's how you do it. That's a win-win-win. And that's why this works in this context of being able to share these communities and share our communities, because now somebody that's out there listening to your podcast or is going to see it on mine or wherever they're going to go is going to go, I just like what they're about. I just like what those guys are about. So yeah, I'm going to subscribe. I'm going to spend the $5. I'm going to spend, we're going to go ahead and donate, and I'm not going to worry about it. And that's just going to go because I know it's going for a good cause. And that was one of the numbers at the Podcast Revolutions convention that just blew my mind about number of listeners. I'll go a little data on you here. Number of listeners versus views versus subscribers. So it was really, really, really interesting. So they had tons of viewers. I mean, they had it's a huge podcast. I think they've had over 1.5 million viewers. It's a huge amount of viewers total. And they have something like, how did it go backwards? They had a huge amount of viewers, which I got to think about it now. I'm making sure I don't mess this one up, because the number that fascinated me were the amount of subscribers that had never watched the show. So the number would be the people that actually there's 2 subscription buttons. That's what it is. It's basically just the subscribe so you can see the free stuff, and pay the money. They have way more pay the money because they have this cause in the front of it. So they have it's a huge number. It's 50,000 subscribers that are subscribing to pay the money, spending money. They're making money on the podcast, but they're donating a huge amount of money. But out of that 50,000, only 20% of the people of that 50,000 actually watch the show. There's literally 35,000 subscribers that have never watched a single episode, but they just like the cause. They like the purpose. They like the vision. They want to back it. They want to see it grow, but they're like, I know what they're about. I don't need to watch their show. But they're creating, that's that compounding interest piece. And I thought that was just fascinating, that it was able to create a huge amount of revenue for a relatively, I would say, unknown cause, a pretty small one that I didn't even know about as a cause, but it was just fascinating to be able to do that. So, that's much to your point, and that's what you're all about, is just encouraging those that to tell everybody that you have a message and people need to hear it. Somebody wants to hear your message. So you're encouraging people to just do the podcast, get out there and just do it. You can do it incredibly inexpensively. I mean, I did 195 episodes for free. Didn't cost me a dime to get it done. Is it costing us to do the TV show? Yes, it's costing us to do the TV show, but that's okay. It's not a huge amount of money, and it's a way for us to reach a broader audience. We get that. We're using it as a business tool. So it depends on what your purpose is of the podcast. I mean, are you doing it for community informational purposes? Are you doing it for as a business to become an influencer? Are you doing it to create a lead funnel for your business? There's a bunch of different reasons to use it. And yet the core is still, you want your message out. You have a message that people want to hear, and everybody does.
Yeah. Your podcast is your platform, and your platform your community will gather around it. You'll build that whole know, like, and trust that we talk about all the time. People begin to identify themselves with you and your show. They feel like they have a connection with you as a host. They've never met you in person, but you've been in their ears or on their screen. There's something special about the bond that they feel like they have with you, like you would have with Taylor Swift, which I've never met. I've never met her, but hey, I love how she treats her audience. So I feel like I have a bond with her just by watching how she does what she does. And I think the one thing I get from people, Jake, sometimes is the whole wrestling around what is a success metric for my podcast. How do I know if I'm on the right path, if I'm making an impact? When I go into a Facebook group and I see people come on and they're like, I've had a podcast for 35 minutes and I have 1 billion people following me and I made $100,000 in 10 seconds. You're like, come on, wait a minute, right? I have one listener. I've got 10 episodes and I have one listener in Cleveland, Ohio, who I don't even know who they are. And I feel like this is not worth my time. Like I'm never going to be as good as that person. So what's the point? Like, why should I even do this? So what I did and a little while ago on my How to Podcast series is I did a little mini series around an apple seed. There's a quote that I love. It's not mine. I can't take credit for this. But the quote basically goes, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. It's immeasurable. There's no way to count how many apples can be the result of one seed, right? So when you have that one listener, you mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation. You like, if I have one listen, great. I'm happy with that. If you have one listener who listens to your show, walks away from that conversation or that episode on your TV show and goes, you know what? Jake's right. I can do this. Or I'm going to treat my partner better. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be a better whatever because of what you put out there in the world. They bring that home with them. They bring it into their relationships with their family. Now their family's better. That one listen is now more than one listen, more than one impact, right? And it continues on from there. Imagine if you treated your partner better, you stayed together in your marriage because of something you heard on a podcast. You've now helped a marriage, which you've now helped the children grow up in a home with a better marriage, better parents, connected, a better dad, somebody who shows up for their family. Somebody got that promotion. There's something that thing they really wanted in life. They were inspired to do it because they heard it on your show and went, wait, Jake says I can do this. I can do this. I have the confidence now to do this because of Jake. That one that you might think is a failure, one person interacted with your content, that's not a true number of the representation of what you've actually done in that moment. So don't think that one is a failure. Celebrate the small. Build a relationship with that one person in Cleveland, Ohio. Find out. I did this on my show recently. I have another podcast, and I saw on my stats I had a new listen in Germany. And I'm like, okay, I know the city, and I know that they've listened to the last 5 of the 20 episodes. So I'm like, this is a new listener potentially. So at the beginning of my episode, I'm like, hey, just as we start, I notice I have a new listener in Germany. I named the city. I'm like, thank you. You know, you've been here for the last 5 episodes. I can see you in my stats. I have no idea who you are and how you found this show, but the fact that you're here, I want you to know I really appreciate you being here. And at the end of the episode, the same episode, I'm like, and before we go, just another shout out to my new listener in Germany. I would love to hear your voice. So there's a SpeakPipe link on my website. You can leave me a voice message for free. I'd love to hear you. And then about 2 weeks later, there's a random email comes in from SpeakPipe and it says, Simit Patel. An email on my SpeakPipe message. And I'm like, I have no idea because I have 8 shows. I have no idea who this is from. So I press play and it's like, hi, Dave. My name is Simit Patel. I live in Germany. And he starts to chuckle. I'm the guy that's listening to your show. And he said, I thought it was so interesting that you called me out. He's like, so this is me. I'm your German listener. And he was laughing. He's like, this is so amazing that I get to talk to the host of the show I'm listening to, right? You don't know the impact you have. You have a platform as a podcaster. Embrace it. Build the community. And then let the community start talking to each other, right? Whatever you can do to get your listeners to talk to each other, not just you, is a great thing. So on top of that, I have a meetup that I do once a week with my listeners. They get to talk to each other. I go sit in the audience as the facilitator of this meetup. They talk to each other and help each other with their podcasts. And they'll ask questions in the group, in the meetup groups. And they're like, you know, how do I do this? And I stay quiet as the host of the meetup group. And there's people looking at me going, Dave, aren't you going to answer that? I'm like, you can answer that question. We already talked about you and I. You already know the answer to this. You answer the question. And now my community is talking to each other. They're building relationships with each other, having each other on their shows. And I get to see this community grow beyond my one listen, right? So don't worry about the small numbers. How do you feel about that?
Amen, brother. Is what I would say about, like, there's I can't even plus one it. There's nothing I can plus one about that. It is so true. It's what we want as humans. Like, we want a community. There's all those people out there like, I'm an introvert, I'm an introvert, I'm an introvert, but you still want a community of some sort. There's something that you're asking for a community. So that's where you're providing that with your weekly meetup. We're doing something, similar. It's about twice a month is what we're going to do, but it's specifically to be able to engage with us because they want the community. They want the connection. They want the relationship. That's what we want as human beings. So understanding that from a podcast host, from a TV host, what does my audience want? They want a connection. They want a relationship. Now, obviously, I'm not going to connect with everybody. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm okay with that. That's perfectly fine. There's a lot of podcasts out there, and one of them probably is. And maybe you are not everybody's cup of tea, but you're somebody's. Like, that's where I absolutely love what you're saying is don't get hung up in the small numbers. You got to understand the force multiplier there of and you told the story about, you impacted somebody's relationship, they're treating their partner better. You saved a marriage. I mean, that stuff happens behind the scenes. The only way it happens behind the scenes, if you're doing the thing, like if you're holding your message in and you don't share your message with the world, you cannot impact the world. It can't. Like, nobody has the ESP to be able to go, what's Jake possibly thinking? God save him. I would hope they wouldn't. But at the same time, it's the same reason you write a book. You write a book so that it's a delivery device for your message. Somebody somewhere picks it up. You just have to know, you have to know that is making a difference somewhere. I mean, there was an interview, I can't even begin to tell you who did it once upon a time or the story. And it was basically they talked to like Elon Musk. And at one point they'd gotten a quote from Gandhi somehow. And there's like this huge myriad of just wildly successful people. And basically their answer was consistent all the way across. And they said, I always knew this is where I was going. I always knew this is what I was going to be. I knew I was going to be a billionaire. I knew I was going to be an activist. I knew I was going to have an impact. You just have to get there. And that comes from, that comes from personal development stuff. And I mean, luckily we're in podcast and TV show land, and that is literally what we're doing. Everything we're doing is personal development. And as long as we're okay with that, yes, there are tactical things you can do relative to equipment and the how and the editing and, who does what and when should it air. There's all those tactical things, but that's all they are. Like, you just simply have to get out there and just start doing it, because you're going to break it repeatedly. I mean, that's just how that's going to go. Just know going into it, you're going to do something wrong. You're going to say something somebody does not like. That's going to happen. And that's okay. And that's okay, because you're going to say something that somebody does like that impacts some in such a way they're able to do something absolutely monumental in the world. Like, you have the ability to create such impact because you're an influencer, whether you're an influencer of one, but you're not. That one person knows 7 people that know 7 people that know 7 people. You're an influencer of hundreds of thousands of people. You just have to touch one person.
Yeah. So for the person that's listening to this conversation, I just want to talk to you for a second. I would love for you to take what Jake said about his goal of reaching 1 million people. That's a big, audacious goal, and I love it because it makes you kind of show up and go, okay, I'm not there yet. I haven't hit the number, so I'm going to keep moving forward. I have this big dream because of why I'm doing it. It goes back to your why. So that's important. Combine that with what we were just talking about having a small audience, and then also reinforce the why there as well. So the why in the small audience is important, and the why for a big audacious goal is important, because that's what's going to keep you focused and on the right path. So it's a combination of what Jake is doing and what we're talking about here. That is how it's going to keep you coming back to the microphone. It's not about the mic. It's not about the tech. It's not about all that stuff. It's not about whether you're on TV or not, if you're on video or audio only. It's none of that stuff. It's the fact that you have a message for the world You can pick whatever medium works for you as a content creator and just do the thing and know your why. That's what's going to keep you coming back episode after episode, week after week, day after day, and build that community. So that's what I love about what you're doing, Jake, is for me, it's like just a reinforcement that I personally am on the right path because I'm following what you're doing, going, you're modeling something really great here that I can learn from. And I think all of us can take a piece of this and apply it to our podcast. Again, whether we have one episode or 100, you're there kind of doing something that inspires all of us. So it's really good that you're doing this.
I appreciate that. And same thing, talking to the audience. If you only heard one thing I said today, right? Get ready to listen to this piece. Like, this is the one thing. If you ignored the rest of it, your podcast is not about you. Like, think about that. Your podcast is not about you. And I'm going to give you the example. Like, this is where I see a lot of people get stuck in I don't know what content I should put out. Right. And they have a hard time creating a content list of, I do this show 1, do this show 2, do this show 3. Well, that's because you're making it about you. So change the thought process. What does my audience want to hear? Like, just change the question for yourself. What does my audience want to hear? What would they want to hear this week? What would they want to hear next week? Create your show topic that way, because it changes the way your brain works, for one. It's neurolinguistics programming stuff, right? This changes the way your brain works. You ask it a different question. It's no longer about me. I'm coming from contribution. Now I'm able to say, my audience is asking for this. Yes, I can speak to that. Yes, I can demonstrate on that. That's what my audience wants. That's an easier way. Like, if you're stuck in that, I don't know what I would create, change the question. Change the question. Does my audience want me to be on audio? Does my audience want to see my face? What do they want to do? What does my audience want? Create your universe around that. And that, once you build it for that audience, guess what? Welcome to Back to Field of Dreams. Like, what was that, 1990s?
Right.
Build it and they will come.
Yeah.
What do they want? What do they want you to build?
Yeah. It's great. When I have my author podcast, it's all interview. It's all about the guests. It's not about me at all in that show. And when we have our pre-interview, I tell them, just so you know, this podcast isn't about you as the guest. And the look on their face, like, hang on, I thought I was coming on to talk about my book. Like, yeah, we're going to talk about your book. This podcast isn't about you as a guest. It's not about me as a host. It's about the listener. So I want you to talk to the listener. I don't want them to be up in the stands at a football game, miles from the play on the field. I want them to be on the field, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow with you as the guest. And I want you to talk to them as if they're here, because they're going to be here listening in their earphones or doing whatever they're doing. And I want you to connect with them. Don't talk past them, talk to them, right? It's all about the listeners, not about you or me as the contributors in the podcast. So, and the look on their faces, they're like, I've never heard anybody say that before. And I'm like, well, you need to hear it more often.
That's the absolute truth, man. That's the absolute truth. And we all need to hear it more often. I have to tell it to myself all the time. Most of the time when I get stuck, it's because I've made it about me. And when I change it to what does my client want? What does my audience want? What does my partner need? What does my family need? It changes the conversation, and I can get past that spot. I just have to change the question.
I love it. Jake, I could have you on all week and just keep recording, but you have other things to do, like fix tractors and be a TV star. You have lots of things on your to-do list, and I appreciate you making time to do this. I would love to have you come back in the future, and let's have a part 2 to our conversation, because there's just this thing going on here. It's a great alignment of a vision and purpose in content creation. So I really appreciate you being here. Tell us again where we're going to find you. We'll have links, obviously, like we all do in our podcast, but where we're going to find you, where to connect with you. Maybe we want to know more about the show, how we can support others as well in your community. Where do we go?
Awesome. This has been so much fun, and I totally will come back. It'd be great. Not easiest, the ways to reach out to me. So we've got our TV show called Total Disruption. It is on E360 TV. You can get it on Fire, you can get it on Roku, you can get it on Google, you can get it on just as an app. It's e360tv.com. Our show is called Total Disruption. You can find us on our website, total-disruption.com. Super easy way to find me. Worst case, send Dave some smoke signals. Hey, I didn't get that. How do we reach out to Jake? And we want to watch a show. We want to send it to the world. Awesome. We'd love to have that happen.
Excellent. And if you need a tractor repaired, Jake's ready. He's got his tools. He'll hop in the truck and he'll come and help you fix your tractor. No problem. No problem. A little side gig for you, Jake, because you got all this extra time.
Right. Yeah, that's just what I needed. That job. Yeah, that's a difficult job.
There you go.
Such as the desire to rebuild an old tractor, and we did that, and now we don't own the old tractor anymore. So now we upgraded.
There you go, Jake. Thank you so much for being on the podcast as my guest today. It's great to have you here. Congratulations on the great things happening in your life, in your community. Watching with great interest, and you're gonna hit that 1 million goal, no problem. So thanks for being here.
Awesome, David. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate you, man.
Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. I hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope they're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast and keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our Meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our Meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.